Happy Sunday. This is an American Waltham Pocket Watch from the 1800s. I've cleaned it up. It's got a nice thick glass crystal. I've had another video on this before, so the problem I have is still there with this pocket watch. So the problem is I like this watch, and the balance seems to be rotating freely. The big problem I have is that when I turn the watch upside down, it doesn't work. So very weak. I made the balance staff for this. Quite proud of myself. So what I want to do is take this the balance cock and the balance off of this watch, and then have a really good look at that jewel, because I'm concerned that the jewel, the upper jewel here for this balance, is not it's not good. I think it's probably cracked, worn out, or something. Now I don't think I could see that when I looked at it before. I've made 2 balance staffs for this thing. I'm kind of getting sick of making balance staffs for it. It's the only watch that I've fixed so far where I've had to make a double balance staff for it. So like 2 balance staffs. So it's kind of frustrating. So first thing I'm going to do is just remove the balance from it, and then from there I'm going to remove the balance from the cock itself, and then I'm going to remove the hairspring. But first I'll check out the jewel to make sure it's not a jewel issue. So it's just pissing me off. It's one of those things where you've made the balance staff to spec, as I've shown you in other videos, and I did a good job on it. The pivots are nice, and the pivots seem to fit in the hole, but that doesn't seem to matter. It seems to be a situation where the balance is basically jammed, or the jewel on the top is jammed. I'm going to lift this up straight up if I can. There we go. So there we go. Just move that out of the way and grab the balance like this. And I'm just going to flip this around. Actually, I might just unscrew it when it's sitting like this, and then let the thing drop out, let the hairspring drop out. And let's just show you how it's done. I get rid of my hat. You don't know I'm wearing a hat, but I am wearing a hat. And just get in here tight and just unscrew this here if I can without. So I've remounted my camera here for my videos, and my lighting is really poor, which I don't like. So I'm going to rest the balance down so that way it doesn't fall. There we go. And that should just come out like that. There we go. So that's that. And the balance, like I said, the balance staff that I made is pretty good. The lower pivot is perfect on it. The upper pivot actually is more perfect, but it looks a little bit thicker than the lower pivot. I'm sure it's fitting into the jewel, but the jewel might be too big. So, but if I look at the, if I get in close to the jewel itself, what I'm going to do is take the jewel off, and then have a look at the jewel under my microscope and see if it's cracked. So you want to give yourself a brace of some sort when you're taking the jewel off, and then see if this screwdriver actually fits in here, and just unscrew the jewel, the screws for the cap, to make sure they're turning, because we don't want to strip them. Slipping, something's slipping here.
I gotta go get myself a better look at this.
And then put the screws far away. I'm going to zoom in as I see if this zoom actually works. Oh, this way, that way.
I'm zoomed in and up close and dirty. And then when you press down on here, make sure the regulator is in a hole. Like that. That way it can all be flat. And just unscrew this like this. Ooh. And you gotta make noises when you unscrew things. So.
And this is the bottom screw or the base screw. So I'm gonna put this base screw next to the other base, other screw. That way I have the base screws on both sides. Now what I want to do is just, if I could get this cap out right by just wedging this in and then rotating, that's great. If I can't, what I'll do is push it out from the other side. And it doesn't look like I can, so what I want to do is just get a, I'm going to zoom out again a little bit. Just want to get a stake from the staking set and then push it out. Try that. Now I've used a stake here with a kind of a inward cone, and that way when I press on this it doesn't touch the jewel. So just push on this here and see if it can go through the hole. Make sure everything is out of the way, and then just push down on it, and maybe that'll come out, and then it'll be on the bottom. Alright, nothing's coming out that way. I may have to tap it like with a hammer. Or I could use my C's jeweling set and just see if I can push it out with my jeweling set. That way I'm not tapping the thing. Try again here. Get my little hammer out. I've got it all aligned here. And if I can just tap it with a hammer, it should come out. It should just go straight down. I think that's all lined up, and the stake is not over the edge, so. There we go. So that just tapped it out, and there's the hole, the remaining hole. And if I look down below, I can see there's the jewel, and there's the cap jewel. And so what I'll do is I'll look at these two jewels in my stereo microscope and see whether there's an issue with the jewel itself. Because if there is an issue with the jewel, then I have to replace this jewel. It looks... The other thing I think I'm going to do is, just to see if it fits, is put the jewel over the pivot I made, and then look at the pivot and see if the pivot goes through the jewel. So I can just sit this balance staff down here on the block, and I've got to get another pair of glasses out to get in close and dirty with this, so that way I know that the jewel, the pivot hole is sticking up through the jewel. So I want to do this by, I'll just put it in like that and then lay it down and see if it sticks through the hole. Doesn't seem to be. Maybe so that the pivot, oh no, there it is. So that's sticking through the hole there. I'm not sure if you can't see this, but it's a perfect fit. So that is sticking through the hole. There's no issue. And now what I need to do then is look at the other side of this, because I made the pivot, or made the balance staff for this. I need to look at the other side and make sure that the pivot, that's the cone part of the pivot, isn't riding up on the jewel hole, because if the cone part of the pivot is riding up in the jewel hole, that's going to provide friction that I don't want. So I'm not sure how I'll be able to tell that. I don't know, it looks like the jewel is just barely sticking out of the top of that jewel hole, which does mean that the pivot is riding up on the jewel hole. So I'm going to draw this for you so you can see what this looks like. You need a piece of paper first though, of course. This video is in case you're really getting sick of Netflix. This is my Netflix replacement video. So here's the situation. So I made a balance. I'm going to use a playing card to draw this thing. So this, I'll say this is the level here where where I go up instead of down. This is where the balance sits. So when I make my first cut, this is where the balance sits. So let me just draw the balance going straight up here like that. And then, see, I got the right type of paper for this as an old engineer. This is like I said before, you really got to be interested in watch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in watchmaking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in order to watch these videos. Otherwise, you're going to become suicidal. And I don't want anybody killing themselves over my videos. Somebody out there said that they thought I was from Newfoundland, but I'm not. I'm a Canadian, and I doesn't have a Newfoundland accent so there. So there's that part there, and then this goes up, and this rests against the inside part of the balance. I'm just going to exaggerate the angles here, okay? Just so you see. I'm exaggerating everything here. This is exaggerated. So, and then that cuts, again exaggerated, cuts down. That's usually thinner on the bottom part. And then this goes out like this. Like this. And then there's a little bit of a cone like that, and a cone like this, and then the pivot on the end here. So there's that pivot there, and then the roller table. The roller table fits on, let's say, it's usually bigger than the where it sits, of course. And I'll just put it in. It's usually snug up against the balance, because it's friction fit there. So that's the roller table there. And sorry about watching me draw this, but there's the impulse jewel, and I'll just draw this like that. There's the impulse jewel, and then on this side, my first cut for this. Now, if this, let's just say these are the timing for the balance, the timing screws for the balance. There they are there, just so you think it's a balance. And just to be a good boy here, I'll put a timing screw on the end here, like that, and like that. It's the world's nicest balance drawing for you. And then here, this goes down a bit. Like I said, this isn't to scale, so don't get mad at me. This goes down a bit, and then the hairspring fits on here. So the hairspring collet fits on here, and then the hairspring is wound around like that. Like that. There, that's my shitty hairspring. And then this goes out, and again I'm exaggerating the distances here. And then there's a little, it goes inward for the oil drop, and then outward, and then cones down like that. So inward, outward, and then cones down. So, and it cones down to the pivot on the end here. So there it is there. So the jewel I took off, right? See if I can grab a pen here so I can mark this. Do I have a red one? I got a blue one. Is that going to make a difference? Let me see if that makes a difference. So the staff in this picture, this is all balance staff. All this is balance staff. Like this. And I'm a shitty artist. ShittyArtist.com. Balance staff, balance staff, balance staff, and then balance staff, and then the cone, and then pivot on the end. So that's the stuff. So I get the roller table punched on there, and currently I have the roller table punched on, and then I have, so I think the problem is here with the pivot. So what's happening, let's just zoom in on this. So I draw it over here maybe, or up here. Probably up here is better. So if I take this area here and I zoom in on it, there's the zoom. Then I have, what I have here is, I've got this is the world's biggest staff. So zooming in like that, and then this thing actually goes down at a bit of an angle like that, and then up again, kind of like this, and then it starts to slope the curve downward towards the pivot, and this is going, see if I screw this up, up like this, and then down, and then starts to curve towards the pivot, and then there's a pivot on the end. So I think the pivot on the end is a bit bigger than that, than what I have. So that's that there. So that's all, again, that's all balance. So I'm going to color this in. And back here is where the hairspring is. You know, the hairspring call is right here, and then the balance is back here. It's the balance back here with its screws like that, and then this like this. So all this here is balance. I didn't draw this perfectly, by the way, but it's usually flatter here on the top, and then comes around, flatter here, then down for the oil, and the oil drip doesn't have to go down that low. And that's basically when I cut the balance, that's what it looks like. And I try to cut it at a bit of an angle, but, and that's so the oil, when the balance, this is the upper, right? So when it's facing this way, the oil would come here and then get caught here before it hits the hairspring. So you do not want oil in the hairspring. That's why these little grooves are there when you make a balance. And then there's my pivot there. So that's the big, that's this drawing like this, and it's this drawing meow like this. There we go. And now the jewel, I need a red pen. I think I used to have a red pen up here. I got tons of these markers. So this is red here. See if this works. So there's a jewel, and the jewel kind of sits like so. Let me see if I don't screw this one up. And there's a little bit of a dip like this as the jewel goes like that, and then like that, and then the jewel is, I'll show you what I have right now. So the jewel is like this, the one I'm looking at right now, and like that. So that's the jewel. And there's the jewel hole. I'm breathing all this marker stuff. I'm probably going to get high on marker, which I don't want to do, so I'm just trying to explain. I'm explaining this to you, Lucy. Explaining. You got lots of explaining to do, Lucy. So that is the jewel itself, and then a jewel is, of course, housed in a setting, and the setting for the jewel is like this thing comes down and the jewel's actually got a lip on it, so the jewel sits, what the heck, I'm in the middle of this, I might as well draw more, right? The jewel sits inside of this setting, and the setting is kind of, how do I do this? The setting has an indent in it, like that. It's actually like this, and then it's like that. And then when you put this in, the bounce, there's a setting, and there's a little tiny edge there where this sits in. I'll just draw it like that, and like this, like this, like this, something like that. Anyway, that's not the important part. And then this is a setting. I'll just go like that and say that's the setting for the jewel. And then the cap for the jewel sits on top. So I'm going to draw that red as well, but I'm going to put some space between it and the jewel itself. So if you look at that, there's the cap jewel, right, like that, and it's usually a little bit round on the top, and then the cap jewel doesn't have a hole in it. There ain't no hole in the cap jewel, and it's in the setting as well, right? So I'll just put that in the setting as well. There it is there, and the setting's always a little bit over the edge of the jewel. I'm not going to show you the settings because, again, waste of time. And there's the setting there. So now what I think, let me just color this in. Everything red is Jewel, let's say. She's actually a really good singer. If you ever listen to Jewel, she was good about, I think, 10 years ago or 15 years ago. When she started, she had some really good songs, and I liked her songs. They were very emotional, very good. And but I haven't heard from her in a long time. So she's changed her face, just like Renee Zellweger or whatever, Renee Welldigger. And these ladies are nice-looking ladies, but they tend to want to change their faces or something for Hollywood. I'd only change my face if I was wanted. Alright, so that's it there. That was the call it for the hairspring, and the hairspring going around in circles like that, right? So I think what I have, the problem I have here, is that when I made this balance staff, there's the world's smallest cap right there. That's the cap. Is that the cap? Yeah, that's the cap. That's the cap that I punched out. And the jewel, like I said, is sitting on the, let me grab this over here. I've got the jewel sitting on the top here. I'll zoom in just a bit here, see if I get any action on the zoom. There we go. See, I put the jewel in here, and it looks like it fits perfectly. I might zoom in on the camera just to show you that jewel sitting there. But what I think the problem is that the jewel, sorry, the pivot for the balance staff I made is just sort of poking itself. It's kind of level with the jewel, so that can be happen for two reasons. The first reason is, and if you look at this, I've got, use my blue here. When I made the balance staff, I might have made it a bit too thick here, and so this part here might be touching the jewel here, so that when this is on, it may be free, but when I flip it open, maybe there's some end shake there, and it's causing it to move a bit and ride on the jewel itself. So the pivot that goes through here is actually supposed to touch the top of this. right here. So this should touch this here, and then it should be free, motion free from the pivot here to where it's open here. So to the base of this pivot here as it touches the cone area of the balance staff, and that would allow it to move freely. If it's just poking its way through the hole here, either the pivot's not long enough, or that the cone, as the cone, I graved the cone inward, I basically didn't make the pivot long enough, or I didn't get rid of enough material on this part of the cone to allow it to ride freely. So to test that, I know that the jewel in the top feels a bit loose, which is a wonderful thing, but it's not touching the cap. So this little cap here, when you put it on top, it should touch the pivot, and it's not touching the pivot, and so that means that all of the friction is between the bottom of the base of this jewel and the cone, and not the cap and the tip of the pivot. It should be the tip of the pivot. So this thing should be riding the pivot. The pivot should be like this, like that, and then the cap should be touching it like that, like this, and the jewel should be sitting here like that. There's the jewel like that, and then this little over here should be coned like that. So it should be in this configuration, as opposed to what I think is happening. There it is there. So it should be like that, and I'll draw the jewels on here again. Hopefully you can see all this stuff. Actually, you can't. What the heck am I doing? I gotta zoom out a bit because you're not seeing the wonderful drawing. So there it is there. So again, there's the cap, and I'm not going to draw the settings here, but in this case here, there's the pivot here coming down, and this is a gap here, and then the pivot goes through the hole, the jewels here, and then the pivot touches the top of the cap, right, with probably a little tiny bit of end shake, and then there's no friction. The friction is between the jewel. Most friction is on the cap, a little tiny bit of friction on the hole of the jewel, and then you get a perfect pivot. So I think I've got too much material here. So the only way to fix this, the pivots, it seems to be the right size. Everything seems to be the right size. So if I take a little material off the edge here, right, and given there's no crack in the jewel here, I'm going to look at that, but if I take a little material off this cone, it might free up the friction between the cone and the jewel itself. I can't think of any other way of freeing that up. So I'm going to examine this under the microscope and see whether I've got the situation that I've just described, which I think I do. So there you go. All right, here's the balance, and I'm going to turn this little light on here and see if I can. There's the balance there, and as you can see, the pivot is not sticking through that jewel, even though that when I look at it, I can see it at the very tip of that jewel hole. But let me see if I got a little light here and trying to focus, but it's just at the tip of that jewel hole, and which means that if I look at that, is it riding on the cone of that pivot as I've described? Because there's the pivot there, and is it riding on the cone of that pivot? Because if it's riding on the cone of that pivot, it's not going to turn properly. So there's a close-up for you. Give me a close-up. Give me a close-up. All right, there's a real shitty microscopic view of the whole thing. So I'm having a really hard time focusing with the microscope, but as you can see, there's the jewel on the top, and I'm just going to move that a bit, and the pivot is sticking through the top of that jewel, and you can just see it rocking a bit, but I'm not sure if it should rock or not, but there it is there. I had to arrange this, put my video camera on my microscope without losing my image or pausing the video, but anyway, that's it there. very difficult to focus this. It's not focusable. So it looks great through the stereo microscope, and not like this. Alright, so now to work on this properly, I need to take the hairspring off of the collet here. And I'm just going to rotate it off here. And then, or sorry, I need to remove the collet from the balance. And let's see if I can get underneath here with the screwdriver to do that. This is always a bit tricky. Sometimes it just pops right up, and other times it's a pain in the ass. You don't want to damage the hairspring though. So I'll just remove that. I'm not going to do this under video. Our hairspring is officially removed. Now I can rest the jewel back on top of this. The balance staff, and then have a look at it sideways in the microscope to see if the cone is touching it. Okay, just to show you the problem I have here, I'm going to put a little bit of Rodico on the base, on the top of that jewel, just like that, just to keep the jewel in place. And I'm going to show you the other end. So I got to get the world's smallest piece of Rodico, or just make an arc maybe. Just arc it. So if I do an arc, then maybe I can show you. So just put the jewel on somehow. Somehow put the jewel on, like I said, put the jewel on. And watch me fumble, ladies and gentlemen. It's really hard to do under camera because I'm not zoomed in at all. That's it, I'm turning this off. Alright, there's a picture of the cone sitting in the jewel. So I put some Rodico on there to keep it in place. This is like incredibly hard to hold. So up close, I'm looking at that cone is resting. There we go, there. Cone is resting on the jewel. And that's why it's not working, because the jewel pivot is not sticking up through the hole. So that's the problem. Alright, so now I have to make a decision. So I could use a J-cut tool and try to get rid of that cone, or I could put it back in a lathe and try to get rid of that cone. So I'm going to take my J-cut out, because setting it up in the lathe means I have to take the roller table off. And I'm going to try it out and see what happens. Alright, here's the situation. I've fixed the balance. It's sitting here nicely, and I've got the jewel in place, but it looks like it's popped up a bit, which means that the cap jewel is not completely in place. So I'm just going to push down on it and see if that helps me here. I'm not sure if that'll help or not, but gonna try it. No, that's not pushing down in place, and as I look at this jewel, it's at a little bit of an angle here, and that is no good. So I'm gonna straighten that up and try again. So on the block, I just tapped the top of this with a punch to put it in there nicely. And now the bottom seems to be level, which is what I was looking for. And then there shouldn't be any end shake. Like I said, I've fixed the staff, and I'm hoping I don't have any end shake here. So I'm just going to put this on just nice and carefully without the screws in the top, because I think it's friction fit nicely. So I'm just going to put this on like that. See if it can find the hole. Come on, find it.
I don't think it's found the hole, or it's just too. See if I can spin this, and the question is does it seem to be, yeah, it's pretty solid, it's not moving anywhere. And I want to turn it upside down. What I'm going to do before I do that is put the screw in, like so, like that, and then I'm going to tighten that down, and then turn this upside down, and see if I get any, see if it still spins, or do I have issues. Before I tighten that, I'm going to spin it a bit so I don't squish whatever jewel is in there. I don't know, this seems to be pushing up whenever I do that on that jewel. So now it's loose again. So I think that I got a problem on that upper jewel. So I'm going to have a look at that again. So I pushed the jewel down a bit with some pegwood. Pushed it down in place on the block here. I'm looking at it and it's very level right now. And I'm going to just put some oil on the top. Now I know that you're supposed to oil the cap jewel, so maybe I just a little bit of oil on the cap jewel. There we go. Not a lot, but just a little. Let me clean this up a bit. And then I'm going to put the cap jewel back on top here in place and turn it around. Try not to get the oil off of it. And then I'm going to just basically push it in place, and hopefully I have the right solution. So I'm going to use pegwood again here and just push this down. And again, make sure that the regulator arms are not on the block, because they'll foul if they're on the block. This thing's just rocking back and forth. It's in pretty tight. And like I did before, I'm going to take a punch here and just punch this down. I think I got to find a wider one so I don't ruin this somehow. Maybe wider and flat. Alright, I found a wider one, and I'm going to put this on top here just like this. And you don't want to punch the jewel, that's not a good thing. So it's on there nicely, and I'm just going to tap that a bit. And let me have a look at what I got. So that's nicely seated in place. This is in place. And then I could put the screws back in here, because I know the screws are holding it down. So I want to make sure that it's in place nicely. Zoom in a bit maybe. And I'm almost finished the video here. I was thinking of just putting the other video on, because it was pretty successful. Like I described the problem, and I know the problem is. What my concern is right now is that the balance staff is not long enough. I'm just a bit concerned about that. So, and if it is not long enough, then I got another issue altogether. So let me just see if I can screw this in place here. Move this over like this, so I can. And maybe, is that holding it down? I'm hoping it is. I can't put any pressure on, upward pressure on this, because the last time I did it just pushed the jewel up, and it pushed the cap jewel up. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? So I just screw that in place. These are your boring COVID-19 videos. You're like, am I actually going to watch this whole thing, or do I just turn it off because this guy's like really boring? So I'm recommending that you watch the whole thing, because you're going to end up in the same situation at some point in time. So there it is there, and then I'm going to take this here like that, and I'm putting this on like this, and I'm hoping it doesn't bottom out. Come on, just go on there and don't give me problems. And a little bit of puffer to see if it gets to the hole. There we go. Now I'm going to put the screw in place, and I'm going to spin it and turn it upside down, and if I've got the right size everything, and then I've got it, no problems. So I'm just going to put the screw in place. I'm not going to tighten it a lot, because I don't want it to push down, because maybe my pivot's too big now. There you go. See, that seems to be a bit tight. Alright, so that's spinning now, which is good. I think it's pushing down on the cap jewel now. So the question though is, if I pull up on that a bit, is it going to spin when it's, just loosen this up just a bit, and I'm going to edge a screwdriver under here a bit to see if I can get a bit of room. There we go. And then spin this again. I might be able to put a little piece of paper underneath. So that's spinning really nicely. So there's no rattle or shake or whatever, because I had that before. It was shaking a bit. And I know I can shim it up just with a little bit of watch paper, but the question is it going to spin when it's sideways? And the answer is yes, it's spinning sideways. Now I'll check it upside down. I think you're going to have to trust me. Oh yeah, it's spinning beautifully upside down. So I have it spinning in all directions. So I'll just show you. So I'm going to, it's like this. I turn it upside down like that. Then turn it back again. And it's still spinning. So there we go. So that's fixed. I'm going to put the watch back together again. And hopefully it starts ticking. I think you're going to have to shim this just a bit though. So now I'm going to put the roller table back on. And I got the jewel facing me, so I gotta make sure the jewel is at 90 degrees to the table. So just put it on like that, and then it's got to go down and at 90 degrees. So you can kind of eyeball it, because you can adjust the mainspring after you put the jewel on, or after you put the roller table on. I pick a stake that's got, is that centered properly? So that doesn't feel centered here. Oh, you got to move it just a bit. There we go. So that is at 90 degrees. All right. You can see that there maybe. So that's 90 degrees. The jewel's facing that way. And then I got to just make sure I got a stake with a slot in it for the jewel. And I'm just going to tap that down right now and make sure that's in place and nice and secure, and don't F up the jewel. There we go. And if I have a look at that, I think there is just a slight gap. Yeah, it's a slight gap. I'm not going to mess with that. And then so that's in place, and it's a stump that I need to use. And if I look at the jewel and where it is, it's slightly off 90 degrees. Darn it. Darn it. I don't want to punch it back on again. I'm kind of lazy. So what I'm going to do is going to put the jewel down, and that is going to be, there's the, I think I may have to adjust the thing here just a bit so it's not, so I got the focus in here. It's at 20, I think it was 12 or something, 17, 12, that should be good enough. So what I need to do is line the jewel up right with the it's gonna fit in like that, and I gotta line that up with the banking pins, and these two things here are the banking pins. Put this on
here, and then take the hairspring and see where the stud is, and then see where that has to be, and then mark it. So what I'll do is, the jewel is slightly off 90, so it's sort of like it's there, right? I could mark that on the thing, but I won't. So the jewel is there. That's where it is. And if I put this on top carefully, like so, I want to see where the spring sits after this is in place. So with the jewel slightly off like that, the hairspring, there's the hairspring itself, and the stud is here. So it's like that. Just rest this on top. And I know this is off just a bit like that. Sort of like that, because it's not 90 degrees, which means the stud is lined up back here, right? And that should give me the right place to push the stud on. So I'm just going to mark this. It's 1, 2, 3 screws over. It's almost lined up 3 screws over, and that is sort of slightly off. Let me look here, like that. 2 and a bit 3 screws over. So 1, 2 and a bit screws over. That's good enough for government work. I'm just going to take this off because I just want to see if this thing will tick for me. It'll be all ticked off. There, take that off. And now I just have to push the spring on. So let me find a hole for this thing. There, perfect. So I said 2.5 screws over, right? So there's where the jewel is. So the jewel was almost perfect, but I was like, why did it go on crooked a bit? I don't know. So the spring then, when I put the spring on it, it's going to be right about a boot there, and just past this mark here. I think before it was over here, so I'm not certain, but it looks like it's right about there. So let me just see if I can push this down a bit with the I don't know if this is the right size. Let's just push it and see what happens. There we go. Perfect. So that's pushed down. And then I got to put this in. This is the hard part. I usually turn this around and try to line it up. I line it up like this, and then I tighten the screw down. It's very difficult, so I'm not going to show you me doing this because it's a waste of my time. Okie dokie, it's on. There's the watch. So what I got to do is wind it up a bit. Give it some tension. I'm hoping I get tick, tick, tick. I know another thing is in shimming it. Let me just do this here really quickly. Give it a little bit of stuff here. And I know to shim it, what I would do to shim the thing is I would take a piece of paper like this and I cut a slice off like that. Cut a slice of paper like this. Alright, and then there's a stud here that I don't want this to be in the way, so what I'm going to do is double it over like that. And I don't know if the shim is too big or too small or what, so I'm going to double it over once and then cut this like so. You don't want it too big. And so that piece of paper here, I'm going to make a little U right over this little stud here, right there, so it's out of the way. So I want to shim it, but I don't want this to be in the way, so I'm going to just cut a little bit of a, I think I just went too far there. I'm going to cut a little bit of a U here, I may have to get a bigger piece of paper here. I just screwed up. Like that, and then grab this like that, and then open it up like this, so like that, and then I'm going to just place this down and see if it's covering the screw hole, and it is, because it will be like this, shimmed like that. And so I just trim the bottom part so it's out of the way. I'm just doing this on camera for fun. Trim the bottom part like that, and let me test and see if it's sitting there nicely. It's not a very wide shim, but I'm going to see if it works anyway. And I'm going to leave the tab in there too. So there's the shim there, sitting on there. And let me just grab this like that. And so when this goes on, it's going to sit like this on top of the movement. So it's not going to be in the way of the barrel, and it's not going to be overlapping there. So I've shimmed before, and I've done it a few different ways, but this is one way of shimming. And now I got to place this straight down on the on that. So let me turn this around. There's the balance, and just make sure that the balance, the palette fork is on the right side. So I pushed it this way and grabbed the balance, and I'm going to see if this thing ticks. And I don't want to squeeze the jewel again, so I'd love for this to work. So move that over, and don't go down yet until you're straight on like this, and then go straight down over the shim like that. And I do have it moving, which is good. So I'm going to grab the screw here and put this in. And it's bouncing around like it doesn't know what to do, but once I get this down, it might be perfect. I don't know. Let's try it out here. The shim is in place, so you do not want to tighten this down until you see good movement on the balance, like I have right now. And I think I got to tighten it a bit more. I can see some wobble on the balance there, just a bit, and I do have a shim under there. So as I tighten this down, it's going to compress the shim. So I don't want it to, it seems like it's wobbling still, so I think my shim is probably, my shim is too big, because I can see too much space under there. So what I'll do here, just remove this like this. That's nice and tight, that screw. So that's a doubled over with another one, so it's kind of a triple shim. So I want to, it's working upside down too. It's not wobbling right now, so just wondering what's going on here. I think I got to get rid of one of the shims here, so let me see. Yeah, that's too loose. So let me pull this straight up again. I like the fact that it's ticking though. And then I'm going to just move this out of the way. Put this upside down like that. Grab this shim here, which I thought was the world's perfect shim. So I'm going to take this shim, and I'm going to get rid of some of the paper here. I may have to get my glasses on to look at this, because it's pretty small. Get to reshim the shim. There it is there. So I'm going to take off, basically cut this in two. So it's only half of the shim, which is like one piece of paper, because I had it tripled over, so I don't think there was that much end shake. Alright, there we go.
I just cut it in two right now, and I'm just going to grab the half that doesn't have the tab on it. Well, you know what? I just cut it in two, but I left the tab in place. Stupid. So let me just cut this again. I'm farting around here on video and I hate doing that. I'm going to grab this here and pull that off. I thought I was going to pull it off. Yeah, that's going to have to be cut. As I fart with this shim. I apologize profusely. Now this shim might be too much or too little, so because I had the tab on top, which gave it a little bit extra. So let me put this down in place and put this right over the hole here, like it was before, and then I'm going to just put this, got it like so, like that. That little tab is pissing me off. It's kind of in the way. I think I'll leave it there because it's only then 2 pieces, not 3. So I'll leave it like that because before it was 3. And then put this down and see if this works. Got to put it like this actually because I'm trying to make sure it's not in the way of the barrel. Man, oh man, this is like fumbling with shims. It's going to be, please fast forward this video. I beg of you. I beg of you. Alright, so straight down, just like before. Make sure the palette fork is on the correct side, and it is. And just turn this around, like so. And I want this to go straight down. So I gotta make sure the jewel is on the correct side. And I think I gotta take off these glasses because I got too much glasses going on here. Jewel is on the correct side, and it is. Then rotate this. Oh man, the shim moved. I breathed. That's what happened. Alright, you gotta hold your breath when you're putting a shim in because you just breathe on it and the damn thing flies. So, did I say damn? I meant darn. Stop it. I could make it moist just a bit underneath there to keep it in place, but I'm not going to. So, just friggin' stay where you are. Alright, straight down with the shim. Don't breathe on it. I'm breathing out of the edge of my mouth right now so I don't frig up the shim again. And straight down, put my finger on here, and then like that. Now let's see if this works with the shim. That shim might be too big, too small, don't know. So I'm going to just screw this down here nice and easy, and alright, still moving. I'm screwing this down tighter and tighter and tighter. And there we go. So, seems to be working. Don't know. And I'll go sideways here with this. And I'm good sideways. And upside down. And I'm good upside down. Actually, I think I did a pretty good job here. So be it. That's the end of the video. I fixed this watch, and I think we're in business, ladies and gentlemen. So that's all she wrote. Thanks for watching the amazing adventures of JD's watch repair and putting a shim in. Again, very long video, but hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Alright, this is the last part of the video. So what I had to do, I had to actually bend
the balance cock down just a bit as I was listening to it. It was working really well, but it sounded different, and it was a little loose, which means there's too much end shake. And instead of having to redo the whole pivot and everything else, I grabbed the balance cock with a pair of pliers, and I just turned it around and pushed down on it ever so slightly to just move it. It's not recommended if you don't know how to do this, but it sounds perfect. And I'm just going to move it up so you can hear it. And then when I turn it around, that's working this way, that way. Turn it around, have a look at it. And I still have to clean this watch, by the way. It's not clean. So it'll run much better when it's clean, but that's it there. So that's working really well. And it's working upside down as well. So see if I can twist this around somehow. Can I do that? I don't know. Maybe not. But there's upside down. Looking at my curtains. So just back that off a bit. Where is this focus going? I don't think there's any focus going on here. Anyway, so that's basically upside down, pointing at my ceiling. And so I'm just trying to prove to you that's working in all directions. How come that didn't focus upside down? That was really weird. So maybe too much light. Anyway, so what I did was I grabbed this part of the balance cock with my pliers, turned it around, and just put a little bit of pressure on my desk here to push it down a bit, because I had a little tiny bit of end shake, and I don't want to have to redo the balance on the balance staff on this. So it's done. I'm going to time it, let it run for a while. It runs really well, and all you do is sort of listen to it closely. Let me back this off a bit. If you listen to it ticking, you can hear it, a clear, crisp sound of it ticking. I turned it upside down, and I could hear it go. It was still ticking, but I heard it go clunk, and I didn't like that clunky sound. And if you listen to this, let me just zoom in even more so I can prove this to you. And if you listen to this closely, use your ears. Just zoom this thing in, and I want it to be close so you can hear it tick. And I'm going to shut up in a second, and you can listen to this ticking. So that's ticking there, and I'm going to turn it around the other way. So listen to that. And then as I turn it around, you can see it's perfectly flat there. There's no movement at all. So it's riding really nice on that, in that jewel hole with the cap jewel that I fixed. And then listen to it. Turn it around this way. And I just put a little tiny bend inward with that balance, with the balance cock. And that's it there. So there we go. That's the American Waltham. You can look up that serial number, but it's a beauty. Anyway, I just wanted to show you the end result, because sometimes I'll do a video on a watch repair, and you never end up seeing the end result. And this has turned out, at the end of all this work, the J-Cot tool didn't work. I had to get the lathe out. I got the lathe out. I trimmed a little bit of material off the cone part of that pivot, and that's all it needed. And then the pivot stuck in through the hole, and it hit the cap jewel perfectly. So there it is there. Thing of beauty. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.